All right, well, this is going to be my part of my story on my life. Um, my grandparents came from Russia in 1869, and they became naturalized citizens in the United States. And at that time, my father was uh, 16 or 17, I guess, at that time when his dad was naturalized. So my dad didn't have to go through that problems because he was just young enough, and so therefore he was included in naturalization of my grandpa. Esther Eckert, my father's wife, was born 4/29/1900 and died 6/21/1947. And that was because of an automobile accident that she died in a car accident. My father, Emil, immigrated in 1899, so his parents came to America with two little boys. Emil was a baby and became very ill on the boat, and his mother was afraid the captain would throw him overboard if he knew he was sick, so she hid him all the while they came across on the boat. Grandpa Andreas married Joanna Wirch in 1893, and she was born 8/3/1873 and died 9/12/1949. Andreas died in 1930. My folks were busy farmers and arrived sheep, chickens, and I was born 1936. I don't know what that is. During a terrible blizzard, the doctor was called, and he came along on Highway 44 as far as our neighbor's Clausen's, and then he left his horse and buggy there, and he walked across the field to our place where I was born. I had arrived a little ahead of time, and doctor got there just in time to see me turning blue, and doctor saved me, I guess, at that time. And I had two sisters, Bev and Dolores, and they were sent to the neighbors down the road at the time of my mother's time for having me. And I guess kids weren't supposed to know anything about where the babies came from. I was the youngest and only boy, and in summers I would spend my time at my aunt and uncle's farm in Rush Lake. Hazel and Gus Weiss. I helped make hay when they were working there with the horses. I would drive the horses, and Uncle Gus would load the hay on the wagon, and then we'd take it up to the barn. And Weiss's, they had a huge horse barn for many horses, and my cousin Forrest and Norm, where they would mow the hay around in the barn when we would pull it up there. And I loved horses and had work horses that I would drive around on the farm. In the 1990s, Uncle Gus had died. They had an ice cream social with fresh cherries. Every summer, whenever they got done with the haying, why they'd call the neighbors in and had a big social on the front lawn. And I know that those cherries are awful good, and I swallowed quite a few of the pits. And a little while later, I had a terrible stomachache. I had, from swallowing those pits, I had them stuck in my appendix. So I had to have surgery then to get those cherry pits out, but I sure love those cherries. I also had a pet dog, and that dog would go any place I was and watch over and protect me. I was just a little kid at that time yet, I guess. And we were running freight train back and forth on the track down here. And I walked across in front of that train and didn't even realize it was coming. But here the train was, and I was on one side of the crossing, and my dog pal was on the other side. And I called him, and he came across underneath the train and got run over, and got one front leg cut off. And so that was quite a trying time. We carried him up to the barn and took care of him, wrapped him up, and he lived through it. And after that, I had another little dog. He liked to chase chickens, and Ma always had a chicken coop full of chickens. And we were back in the chicken house chasing chickens one day and couldn't get out. The door had slammed shut, and here we were locked in.
You and the dog?
Me and the dog and a few chickens. And the door had a little transit on top, and I crawled up on the door and stuck my head out to see what was going on. And that transit came down, caught my back of my neck in there, and I was hanging in there. I couldn't get out. So I managed to call Mom, and she came running and got me out of hanging up in the chicken house. I guess she didn't beat me to death for chasing chickens. She was glad I was alive. I was always her little boy. I was always kind of fond of airplanes because there was an airfield right across the highway from where we lived. And I could go over there and watch the planes and get a ride once in a while. That's where I had my first airplane rides, at the Clawson's Airport. And
how much did it cost?
Well, I'm not sure. I don't think it was much more than $5, if it was that much. And I could get a ride most any time I wanted if I had the $5. And I usually had money because I grew sheep, had some sheep on the farm. And we'd shear them, get the wool off, and then sell the wool and sell the sheep, and made some money that way. If my sisters ever needed money, where they could come borrow it from me. And so.
Well, that airstrip, how did that get started? Who was in charge of that?
I think one of the Coles.
And he
got back from the military. He was a pilot, I guess. He had that little yellow Piper Cub, and they flew around with that. The Coles was, his father had the hardware store in Ripon.
Okay.
Let's see, what else have we got here?
Your mom, what she did.
Yeah, my mother was a hard-working girl. She raised ducks and chickens and eggs, and so she could make a little money. And then they had a route in Oshkosh where they would deliver the chickens and eggs, and people loved that. But that was right after, during the war, right after the war, and things were rationed then, and so they were lucky to be able to sell that. People in town were lucky that somebody would supply them with fresh food, produce.
Did she do butter too?
No,
No.
I don't think so. And we had a few German prisoners of war living at Green Lake. They lived at the Baptist Assembly. A big high fence around the place and armed guards. They would work for the canning factory here in Ripon, and they'd come out and pick sweet corn and stuff like that out in the cornfield. And I know they had a guard on the truck, and they'd pick the corn, throw it in the truck.
At your farm?
Yeah, at our farm. And had a guard on either end of the fields with a rifle, but they didn't want to go anywhere, as they were happy that they were done with the war and they were in the United States. And my mom would always fix a big lunch and take it out to them. We had to feed them, I guess, and they surely appreciated that. So. My mother was a good cook, and she made a lot of Christmas cookies, and started them in a big cracks down in the basements where she stored them. And you could always get a cookie there, sneak down and get a cookie from out of the cookie
crock.
Jar, out of the crock. We had a smokehouse where they cured bacon and ham, and also there was a large garden. Mother always had this big garden. And when we went to my cousin's wedding down in Milwaukee, the day that there was this big car accident, I was in the back seat, of course, playing with a little airplane, and Mom and Dad were in the front, and there was a big accident, and I got all broken up, and hips and legs and shoulders and skull fracture.
Collarbone.
Yeah, collarbone. In the back, I was laying in the back in a car. Mom was still alive. She looked at me and asked me, said, "Sonny, how are you? You okay?" I guess I said, "Yeah, I'm all right." But she died right there in the car. I was hurt real bad with broken collarbone and pelvis and hips and knees, and had a concussion. Was taken to a local hospital down there, and there they kept me for about a week and couldn't seem to do anything for me. So then they came back to Ripon, and from Ripon we went to Berlin to the hospital there, and then finally my Uncle Otto suggested that they take me to Rochester. They took the back seat out of a car and laid me in there and drove to Minnesota. And it was a Catholic hospital, and the sisters, St. Mary's Hospital, and they took real good care of me, and it's really kind. And I decided that that time when I get out of that hospital, I'd be walking. And after about 3 weeks in the hospital, I came home in a body cast for a total of 6 months throughout the summer. And it was so hot, I got bed sores. Dolores Bev took care of me at the big farm. Then when school started, one of my teachers came down and helped me with my lessons at the one-room schoolhouse, and it's still standing up there on Highway 44. And she tutored me, and so I didn't miss much school. And once I got to navigating around on crutches, I would ride my bike to school, pedal it with one foot, and we learned how to play baseball and could always hit a home run so I could make it around the bases. The doctor told me not to step on my foot, to not to put pressure on it, because my hip needed time to heal. I didn't always follow directions through the summer. The summer following the accident, I cultivated 100 acres of corn from Dad with the tractor. I tied my crutches on the side of the tractor and went out and cultivated corn. Of course, I never put any weight on my foot. I listened to the doctor.
Yeah. Uh-huh. How long were you on crutches?
I don't know. 6 weeks.
You
On the crutches, I was on 4 years.
4 years on crutches.
Nice.
Yeah.
And let's see, I started driving around my sister's got a little brown 1951 Ford two-door, and I drove it as soon as I was 16. Chief of Police Ira Dunham gave me my driver's test, gave me my license. In the summer, I weighed trucks at the Peaviner. I was paid $1 an hour and worked 16 hours, 20 hours a day. After that, I drove truck for Earl Hammond, the neighbor, hauling peas to the factory. Then my dad bought a truck, and I hauled peas and sweet corn for the canning factory. I attended confirmation in 7th and 8th grade, and Donna was also in it. In high school, we were in youth group. One noon, we were scooping the loop in downtown Ripon, and I was smoking a cigar in our car, and of course the car was full of guys, and the preacher's son was included. Next time I saw the preacher, Reverend Jordan said, "You better show up for choir practice," and he let me know he didn't approve of the cigar. I sang in a barbershop quartet. Choir practice brought Donna and I together, and we started dating. First date was tobogganing at the ABA in Green Lake. I drove to school and raced the guys during noon hour. Drove to Green Lake at noon too. Gas was 25 cents a gallon. I could drive all week for $1. Donna's dad would Donna's dad would say, that guy coming again tonight? I graduated in 1955 with about 60 others in my class.